In the autumn of 1927, a municipal excavation crew working beneath Chicago's near west side broke through a wall of calcified bedrock at the 70-foot level and entered open space. Not a natural karst cavity, not a forgotten Prohibition-era smuggling route, a perfectly linear horizontal drift running into absolute darkness, its ceiling supported by identically milled, load-bearing pillars of an unknown dark gray metallic composition. The walls were entirely devoid of tool marks, flawlessly smooth, possessing a matte finish that seemed to actively swallow the light from the workers' carbide lamps. On the floor lay rows of perfectly aligned, sealed seized by a private contracting firm heavily guarded by armed men with no identifying insignias. Less than a month later, a young motor salesman named William W. Grainger founded a company in Chicago. He issued a simple 8-page catalog known as the Motor Book, offering a sudden, massive, and highly standardized inventory of electric motors to an expanding American market. Mainstream history tells us this was simply brilliant entrepreneurship, the birth of a B2B distribution empire that now supplies every factory, hospital, and municipality on Earth. But the physical evidence, the geological strata, and the deafening silence of the missing municipal Motor Book, the few units that escaped the quiet, aggressive corporate buyback programs of the 1950s. When independent forensic metallurgists have managed to dismantle these early units, they have encountered a series of hard engineering impossibilities. First is the purity of the copper wiring used in the stators. In 1927, the standard commercial process for smelting and refining copper, electrolytic refining, could achieve a purity of approximately 99.9%. While impressive, this 0.1% impurity primarily consisted of oxygen, sulfur, and trace metals like iron and antimony. These impurities significantly affect the electrical conductivity and thermal resistance of the wire. Yet, the copper wound inside the anomalous 192,000 motors possesses a tested purity of 99.999%. This is oxygen-free, high thermal conductivity OFHC copper. The industrial vacuum melting processes required to produce copper of this extreme purity, devoid of any gaseous inclusions, did not exist in any functional capacity until the mid-1930s, and even then only in highly restricted experimental laboratory settings. Was completely moistureless and maintained an ambient temperature of exactly 62 degrees Fahrenheit, despite being situated beneath a swampy, geologically unstable metropolitan center. The walls of the drift, composed of that dark, light-swallowing material, were not structural supports, they were thermodynamic heat sinks. The motors were found resting on specialized conductive pallets that drew latent kinetic energy away from the units. The entire cavern was a massive, passive climate control mechanism. Whoever built this logistics node possessed an understanding of materials science and geological The index cards refer to folios that no longer exist. The microfilm reels exhibit deliberate physical splices right at the dates in question. We must look to the system that orchestrated this void. In 1928, the Department of Commerce, operating under then-Secretary Herbert Hoover, rapidly expanded its division of simplified practice. The stated goal of this government body was the elimination of waste through the standardization of industrial sizes and dimensions. This is the official narrative. But a closer reading of the internal, declassified memos from this division reveals a panicked, reactionary tone. They were not attempting to invent standards. Localized phenomenon, a secret military cache perhaps, or a wildly successful undocumented Prohibition-era black project. But the physical evidence refuses to remain isolated. When we broaden a macro pattern, we see that the Chicago node was merely one access point to a massive, continent-spanning pre-existing industrial infrastructure. 4 years after Corcoran's discovery, in the deep winter of 1931, a reinforcement crew working in the sub-basements of the massive Packard automotive plant in Detroit stumbled upon a similar anomaly. They were attempting to integrated into the wartime production machine, recognized the danger this discovery posed to the official narrative of American industrial supremacy. They did not attempt to open it. They collapsed the mine shaft with massive quantities of dynamite, sealing the vault beneath thousands of tons of rubble and shattered bedrock. Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh. These were not random locations. They became the three great pillars of the American industrial century. The accepted historical narrative claims that these cities grew into industrial titans because of geography, proximity to waterways, and the hard work of pioneers. But the hidden strata tells a much darker, much more profound story. These cities were built precisely where they were because the infrastructure was already waiting beneath them. The factories were simply built on top of the ancient logistics nodes, tapping into a pre-existing grid left behind by a civilization or an intelligence that operated on a scale and with the precision that we are only just beginning to comprehend. The Industrial Revolution was not an era of invention, it was an era of extraction. We did not build the machine, we simply found the keys to the warehouse. FINO reports. The breach in the retaining wall was not the result of gradual decay. It bore the distinct acoustic and physical hallmarks of a shaped, directional explosive charge. The flood was not an accident. It was a deliberate, engineered geological reset. The subterranean freight tunnels that flooded in 1992 intersected dangerously close to the original 1092-7 excavation site. Rumors had begun to circulate among urban explorers about anomalous structural pillars and sealed metallic bulkhead doors hidden in the deepest uncharted sections of the tunnel grid. The system could not risk a public discovery. By intentionally breaching the river wall, they flooded the entire underground of the world is not recorded in the brightly lit archives of the victors. It is buried in the rubble, sealed behind the concrete, waiting in the deep, echoing silence of the strata below. And the motors are not the only things they pulled out of the dark. The standardization of physical components was merely phase one. What happens when the underlying logic of that ancient logistics network is applied not to machines, but to human populations? Next time, we tear apart the 156 Interstate Highway Act, stripping away the propaganda of post-war prosperity to reveal the deeply unsettling non-human geometry embedded in the concrete arteries of America. We will examine the anomalous electromagnetic frequencies documented during the initial paving of Route 66, and the impossible, perfectly repeating subterranean structures detected beneath the Los Angeles interchange. The grid is not meant to connect us, it is meant to contain us.